A woman was pulled over by police on a highway. She said she had just given birth on the side of the road, but she had never been pregnant a single day in her life. This is the story of Taylor Parker, but it's not like any case you've heard before, because it didn't begin with a gun. It began with a lie that stretched on for 11 months. Picture a woman throwing a gender reveal party. She shows off ultrasound photos, she buys baby clothes, arranging every little item in the nursery. Friends send their congratulations. Her boyfriend plans to become a father. It all looks like a happy family about to welcome a new life. But there's a problem. There is no baby. There never was. And as that fake due date drew near, this woman had to face a truth she could no longer hide. A truth she was willing to do anything to bury. If you watch this video to the end, you'll see how far a lie can grow when someone would rather do the unthinkable rather than admit the truth. And you'll learn the warning signs no one should ignore. Because this story doesn't begin with a scream, oh no. It begins with a party, a smile, and a pregnant belly that was never real. A police officer pulled over a car that was swerving. The woman inside said she had just given birth on the side of the road, but she had never been pregnant a single day. October 9th, 2020, in Texas. A state trooper was on patrol. He noticed a car driving erratically, drifting across the lane. He signaled for the car to pull over, a routine stop. He had no idea he was about to step into one of the strangest cases of his career. When he approached, the scene inside the car made him freeze. A woman was panicking, and in the car was a newborn baby. The baby wasn't breathing. The woman spoke. She said she had just given birth on the side of the road. She was racing to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma. It was an emergency. A desperate mother, a baby in crisis. The trooper immediately called an ambulance, and both were rushed to the hospital. On the way, no one had any reason to suspect a thing. It all looked like a tragic baby delivery gone wrong, an unlucky child. But no one knew that every detail of that story was a lie. At the hospital, doctors examined the woman. Almost immediately, they noticed something wrong. Her body showed no signs of someone who had just given birth. Then they discovered a truth far colder. This woman had no uterus. She had surgically removed the organ long ago. Biologically, it was impossible for her to be pregnant. So if she couldn't give birth, whose baby was in that car? Now let's go back nearly 1 year to the start of this woman's fateful lie. Nearly a year before that traffic stop, this woman told her boyfriend something. She told him she was pregnant. That was the beginning of everything. Her name was Taylor Parker. Her boyfriend's name was Wade Griffin. Griffin had no idea about Parker's previous surgery. He had no idea to doubt her. When she said she was pregnant, he believed her completely. But Parker didn't just say it. She began building an entire fake world around that lie. She used a pillow to fake a pregnant belly. She created fake ultrasound images. She bought baby clothes and supplies for the child. Think of all the effort to keep the lie going. Every day, Parker had to wear that fake belly. Every time someone asked about the baby, she had to invent more details. Every ultrasound photo was faked. This lie became a full-time job. But no one knew that this lie would keep growing until it could no longer be controlled. The couple even held a gender reveal party. They invited friends and family. Everyone celebrated a baby that didn't exist. Parker went even further. She and Griffin toured a property worth $4.7 million. On the contract, she used the name Taylor Parker Griffin, even though the two were never married. She painted an entire future, a big house, a huge inheritance, a perfect family, all of it built around an imaginary child. Sometimes a small lie just needs another lie to cover it, but Parker's lie was different. It demanded something she could not create, a real baby. And as the fake due date approached, the trap she had set for herself began to tighten. A lie about a pregnancy comes with a cruel deadline. One day, people will expect a baby, and Parker had no baby to show. That day drew nearer, and the world around her was waiting. Friends waited, family waited, her boyfriend waited. Everyone believed the baby was about to arrive. With the pressure pressing down on Taylor, she could have confessed, she could have told the truth and faced the consequences, accepted the shame and moved on with her life. But she did not choose that path. An ordinary person at this point would tell the truth, but Parker was not an ordinary person, and she made a decision she could not take back. Instead of confessing, she began to make a plan darker than anything the people who knew her could imagine. She would take someone else's baby, and no one knew that this wasn't the first time Parker had faked a pregnancy. Police would later discover it was a recurring pattern in Taylor's life, a habit of lies that ran deep. But this time was different. This time, the lie had gone too far to take back. Parker began searching for a target, a pregnant mother, close to her due date, someone she knew, close enough for Taylor to get near without raising suspicion. For some people, admitting the truth is more terrifying than committing a crime. Some people's egos, when pushed into a corner, can become like a cornered animal. Now, you could say this story truly revolves around Reagan. She's the one who should be remembered the most. Reagan Simmons Hancock. When this tragedy happened, Reagan was only 21 years old. Before Reagan was in the news, she was a regular young person with her whole life ahead of her. She had already had one child, and she was pregnant with her second, a baby girl. She named her daughter Braxlyn Sage Hancock. Those who knew Reagan spoke of her with tenderness. She was a wonderful mother, a devoted daughter, a good sister, a loving wife. The director of a later documentary described her in simple words. Reagan was the embodiment of the best things in all of us. She was just beginning her life, 21 years old, already a mother to one and about to welcome another. But one woman was looking at Reagan with completely different eyes, not with the eyes of a friend, but of someone making a plan. To Parker, Reagan wasn't a person. She was a solution, a way out of Parker's collapsing lie. Reagan was carrying inside her the thing Parker needed the most, a baby. A baby about to be born, right at the moment Parker needed a baby to produce. And this is the coldest truth of this case. She was targeted not out of hatred or conflict, but simply because she had something another person needed. On October 9th, 2020, Parker went to Reagan's house, and what happened behind that door is something no one could have prepared for. October 9th, 2020, in New Boston, Texas, a day that began completely normal, a day that would end in tragedy. That day, Parker came to Reagan's home. The two women knew each other, so when Parker showed up, there was nothing suspicious. That's exactly what makes crimes like this so frightening. The perpetrator isn't a shadow in the dark. It's a familiar face, someone trusted enough to step into your house. Here we won't go into the details of what happened inside that house, because the truth is too brutal, and because Reagan and her unborn child deserve more respect than gruesome details. What you need to know is this: Parker attacked Reagan. and she took the baby Reagan was carrying. According to her family, Reagan fought back to the very end to protect the child, up to her final moments. After Parker left the house, she took the newborn baby with her and she drove away. She headed towards a hospital in the next state, Oklahoma. Her insane plan now became clear. She was going to bring the baby home and pretend it was hers to complete the lie she had carried for 11 months. Think about the coldness of that plan. She intended to walk into the house with a baby in her arms and tell Griffin that this was their child. As if the baby's real mother had never existed. But even in the most desperate moment, a mother's love is the strongest love of all, and sometimes it's the very thing that leaves behind the evidence to condemn the killer. Because Parker's plan was about to collapse right there on the highway when a state trooper noticed her swerving car. At the hospital in Oklahoma, doctors needed only a few minutes to know something was very wrong. They examined Parker. Her body showed no signs whatsoever of a birth. None. Then they discovered the truth about her previous surgery. Parker had no uterus. There was no way she had just given birth, as she had claimed. But no one knew that the truth about the baby was even more heartbreaking. The newborn baby Braxlin was treated by doctors with everything they had, but the injuries were too severe. Braxlin did not survive at the hospital, and DNA testing afterwards confirmed what everyone had begun to suspect. The baby was not Parker's child. She was the daughter of another woman, Reagan Simmons Hancock. At the same time, in New Boston, another horrifying discovery was waiting. When family members came to Reagan's house, they found her and they realized the unthinkable had happened. Police arrived quickly. They began connecting the pieces. A pregnant mother attacked in Texas. A woman with a newborn stopped at the Oklahoma border. The same day, not far apart, two truths in two different states now came together into one complete picture. A picture that sent a chill through all of America. Parker was arrested that very day. Her 11-month lie had led to a crime beyond imagination. And as the police dug deeper, they realized this crime was so rare it had a name of its own. The crime Parker committed is so rare it has a name of its own among investigators. They call it fetal abduction. This is an extremely rare type of crime. It happens when an attacker targets a pregnant woman to steal the baby from her womb. Cases like this are almost impossible for an ordinary person to comprehend. They go against every natural human instinct. Experts have studied this kind of crime for years. They found a common pattern among many perpetrators, usually a woman who has faked a pregnancy, someone facing the pressure of producing a baby she doesn't have. The motive is usually not money nor hatred. It's the fear of being caught lying, the fear of losing a relationship, an identity they had built. But even among these cases, Parker's stands out for how calculated it was. This was not an impulsive act made in panic. Parker faked her pregnancy for 11 months. She had built an entire fake world, and she chose her victim in advance. When police pieced together the timeline, they found evidence of preparation. They found that this was a plan, not an accident. They also discovered that Parker had faked pregnancies before. This was a recurring pattern in her life, a habit of lies that runs deep, this time leading to deadly consequences. The director of the documentary about the case would later observe, the depth of Parker's selfishness and cruelty seemed unique to her, a habit of deception. If no one stops it, can escalate year after year, until it leads to something like this. When the police put it all together, they knew they were facing an especially dangerous perpetrator, and now justice had to speak. A trial lay ahead. More than 100 witnesses, weeks of trial, but Parker's fate came down to a single legal question. On October 16th, 2020, Parker was extradited to Texas. She was charged with capital murder, and kidnapping. In December 2020, a Bowie County grand jury formally indicted her. And the next month, lead prosecutor Jerry Rochelle announced he would seek the death penalty. The trial took place in 2022, lasting several weeks. More than 100 witnesses were called. There were forensic experts, there were law enforcement officers, there were people who knew both Parker and Reagan. The prosecution argued this was capital murder because the killing happened during the kidnapping. Under Texas law, that was the key point that made Parker eligible for the death penalty. But no one knew that the defense would counter with a deeply controversial question. The question was about the baby's status. Was baby Braxlin born alive, or was she already dead? This wasn't just a technical detail. This was the difference between life in prison or the death penalty. Their argument was this: if the baby was already dead, then legally there could be no kidnapping, and without a kidnapping, Parker wasn't eligible for the death penalty. An entire trial, an entire life hinged on that fragile line. Justice sometimes rests on the coldest of technical details, where a single legal definition can be the difference between the life and death of a verdict. The prosecution answered with a testimony from a paramedic and a doctor. Based on that, the court concluded that baby Braxlin was born alive at the moment she was taken. So the jury delivered its final answer. After weeks of trial, the jury withdrew to deliberate. They only needed about an hour, 1 hour, for a case that lasted weeks, with hundreds of pieces of evidence that shows just how convincing the evidence was. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Taylor Parker was guilty. Guilty of murder, guilty of capital murder, and guilty of kidnapping. But the trial wasn't over. Next was the decision on punishment. The prosecution asked for the death penalty. They laid out the degree of calculation and planning Parker had shown, the cruelty of the entire crime. On November 9th, 2022, the sentence was handed down. Taylor Parker was sentenced to death. But no one knew that the heaviest moment of the trial wouldn't come from the verdict. The heaviest words would come from Reagan's family. At the sentencing, Reagan's family was given the chance to speak. Her mother stood up and faced Parker directly. She spoke about her daughter. She said Reagan was still alive and still fighting for a child, even in those final moments. She poured out all the grief of a mother who had lost her child, in words heavy with pain. Throughout the trial, Reagan's family had to sit and hear every detail. They had to relive the worst thing of their lives. Day after day. That's a price no verdict could ever repay. A sentence can't bring back the dead. It can't erase the pain, but it affirms something important, that the lives of Reagan and baby Braxlin had value, and that evil, no matter how cruel, must finally pay. But in America, a death sentence is rarely the end. It's only the beginning of an appeals process that can stretch on for years. Parker did not accept the verdict. She raised 25 points she claimed were errors. She fought all the way to the highest court in America. A death sentence in America is almost never the end. It opens a chain of appeals that can last decades. Parker's lawyers began making their arguments. One of the main ones was about the media. They said Parker hadn't received a fair trial because the case was too heavily in the press and on social media. They also revisited the old question, whether baby Braxlin had truly been born alive. But no one knew that every appeal would fail. In November 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the verdict. They rejected the defence's argument, including the claim that baby Braxlin was already dead before she was taken. The court relied on the testimony of medical experts. They concluded that a rational juror could be certain baby Braxlin was born alive. That meant the kidnapping was real and the death penalty was valid. Then, Parker took the case to the United States Supreme Court. This is the highest court in America, her last chance. That May, the Supreme Court declined to review the case, and the death sentence stood. With that, Parker's direct appeals have been exhausted. The case has now moved to a different legal stage called a habeas review, but the core outcome doesn't change. The execution date has been set, but the legal process for the death penalty cases in America often take years. Parker is on death row. She is one of only a handful of women awaiting execution in that state. When all the trials have ended, there's one thing we should ask ourselves. What will we remember about this story? It's easy to get pulled into the horror of the crime, to remember only Taylor Parker and what she did. But that would be a mistake, because this story is not about Parker. It's about Reagan and about baby Braxlin, the child who never got a single day in this world. Reagan Simmons Hancock was only 21. She was a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister. She was building a life and about to welcome a new one. Her case also exposed a troubling truth about society, that there are gaps in how we protect pregnant women, and that a lie, if nurtured long enough, can lead to the unthinkable. And the deepest lesson of this case is how ordinary everything seemed before tragedy struck. The perpetrator wasn't a monster in the dark. She was someone familiar. An ordinary face with an ordinary smile, with a lie growing larger behind that smile. Don't let the name Taylor Parker be what you remember most about this story. Remember Reagan, a young mother who fought to her last breath to protect her child. The chilling lesson in this case leaves us this. Sometimes danger doesn't come from a stranger in the dark. It comes from someone you know. Someone desperately hiding a truth they can't bring themselves to face. So what do you think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you think Reagan's story deserves to be remembered, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.